Welcome back to the London Futurists podcast. I'm David Wood, a survivor from the early days of the smartphone industry, who aspires nowadays to be a radical real-world futurist.
And I'm Callum Chase, a co-founder of the AI safety startup Contium and a writer and keynote speaker on the future of AI.
AI-driven automation of cognitive labour is not merely another technological transition, but a structural discontinuity that will end, sooner or later, the central role of wages in how society operates. This discontinuity can be called the End of Postwar Capitalism. That's the conclusion of a tightly argued set of essays, the Discontinuity Thesis, written by our guest in this episode, Ben Luong. The essays look at a range of arguments that are all trying to make the case that wages paid for cognitive labour will remain significant for the majority of people so that capitalism can continue in place, even with AI having greatly expanded capabilities. According to Ben, each of these arguments fail. These back and forth debates are what we'll be exploring in this episode. Ben, welcome to the London Futurists podcast.
Yeah, no problems.
Thank you for joining us, Ben.
Thanks for having me on and reading my thesis. I'm looking forward to discussing it more and stress testing it as well.
Well, in that case, maybe you can start by telling us a bit more about your background and experience that led you to decide to get involved in that project, the Discontinuity Thesis.
I've got a computer science background, but I work in marketing. Last summer, I heard on the news that Mark Zuckerberg declared war on the advertising industry and he's going to automate it all. And it got me thinking about the future of work. And now my own job has changed from doing work to just verifying work. So in the past, say if you were a solicitor, it might take you a while to write a contract. But if you've got a contract in front of you, it's a lot easier to verify that. And I'm thinking that's going to change the total nature of work. You need fewer people to verify. The core, what I thought of back then was P versus NP. It's like a computer science problem where NP problems are hard to generate but easy to verify. But I think AI inverts that, and now generation is cheap. You can generate 100 contracts, but to verify which contract is correct, it needs some expertise. That changes the economics of it all. In the future, you just need less people to do the same amount of work. I just started writing that down, arguing it with a few bots, and I've just done that backwards and forwards. As the models have got better, I've stress tested it every time a new model comes out. I've stress tested it, and every time new capabilities come out, I update it, and I think it's on version 3.3 now. Every time somebody found a hole in it, I just patched it up.
What kind of marketing are you doing, Ben? What kind of marketing are you seeing that you're now verifying rather than executing?
I do Google Ads, and now Google Ads is all automated more or less. You just tell it what you want to do, tell it this is a success, and the machine just does it all. There's not much to it at all now. My background is actually search engine optimization. A lot of that's gone. That's part of the reason I've done these websites. I sort of know how the machine works, and that's why I'm seeding it. So if you type into Google Discontinuity Thesis or unit cost dominance, it will come up as an AI overview and explain it all.
So that's one reason you've chosen relatively unusual phrases to describe some of your concepts. That's clever.
Sometimes the machine just comes up with really good phrases. I spent hours debating this with the bot, and when it comes up with a good term, I think I'll keep that one and put it in. That's the way to do it. If you want to coin a phrase, make it fairly obscure and then try and get it into the vocabulary, and then you own it. Somebody typing in unit cost dominance just gets my fury. It does sound like a phrase that should be an economic term anyway.
Yeah, it does sound very much like a phrase that an LLM would come up with. So what is unit cost dominance? Talk us through that concept.
Unit cost dominance is the inflection point of when you get replaced. That's happened throughout history. When something is cheaper, it displaces the more expensive thing. But for AI, the model I use, though, is AI plus verifier, because that gets rid of two of the most common complaints, hallucinations, and people prefer the human touch. If you've got AI generating and you've just got somebody there verifying it, then that gets rid of the hallucinations. And if it's I prefer human output, that's why the verifier does. It gets the machine output and then puts the human layer on it. But because the human layer is a lot thinner, they can do it a lot cheaper. Back to the low contract. A solicitor that writes a contract from scratch is going to get out-competed by one that just gets a machine to write the contract and just verifies it. Once that's happened, a lot of solicitors just get made unemployed because you don't need 10 solicitors anymore. You need one solicitor and one bot that just spits out the contract, and the solicitor just reads them, checks it all, and signs it off. So what we've got is a team of people reduced to one person. But the verifier role is actually only a temporary role as well, because eventually the machine just learns that. Every time the senior verifier checks the machine, corrects it, that's training data, and then eventually the machine will just self-verify. That just gets rid of people, and it's all to do with costs. If it wasn't cheaper, people wouldn't use it. That's why I call it unit cost dominance.
So unit cost dominance is the point when AIs, whether they're LLMs or a successor version, is cheaper at pretty much any job, any task than a human. And AI plus verification is a temporary situation where those machines are doing everything and you've just got a human verifying, but in a reasonably short order, the verifier will become a machine rather than a human.
Well, he still might be human because you'll still need liability or somebody to sue. But yeah, eventually the human will just become a decorative person that just rubber stamps it. If you look at some of the scandals that have come out about hallucinations in reports, that is people trusting the machine too much. They trust the machine enough not to even bother checking it. I think there was a KPMG report recently where the machine had hallucinated references. That shows you that even now people are saying that the machine is better than them because they're not even bothering checking it. I think the verified position is a temporary position, but also a lot of verification is trivial, or a machine can do it as well. Especially in software, I think that's why they're getting replaced first, because in software, you can write the test before, so you can get the software written, then a machine can just verify it, and at the end, anybody can just say, okay, that worked. Write a program that pops up, hello world. You don't need to be an expert programmer to do that. You just see it pop up. The other analogy I use is a boiler system. To design a boiler system, it's quite hard to do, but to verify it, you just switch it on. If the house heats up, then that's it. And a lot of verification is actually that. That's why a lot of people are just going to get wiped out, because verification isn't that hard anyway. And if a machine does the work, verification is trivial, then there is no work there. The last person to have a job in those situations is just the liability shield. So it's just the person that says, well, on the off chance the machine's got it wrong, I'll take the rap for it. And that's it.
You have a related concept called interface collapse.
Yeah.
Which distinguishes between the work done on individual tasks and stringing together a whole network of tasks to do a whole role more efficiently.
Yeah.
I found that particularly interesting in your thesis. Could you talk us through that?
Yeah, well, what it is that at the moment, machines are good at doing tasks. There's a benchmark called GDP Val. It's basically valuable economic work. It measures real-world tasks, like write this investment thesis, like a mid-level investment banker would do it. On average, GPT 5.5 now can do 85% of tasks at equal or better quality for a fraction of the costs and a fraction of the time. One of the defenses against that is jobs aren't just tasks. They're a collection of tasks. You've got to stitch them together. But the other benchmark is called OS World, and that is a computer benchmark, which the machine can control your computer. And once it controls your computer, well, it can stitch all the tasks together. So if you've got 10 tasks you need to do in the past, you may need to write an email, put it into a CRM, use a separate booking system. Once you've got a machine that can operate the computer just as well or better, the latest GPT 5.5 and Opus 4.8 and Mythos can all operate a computer better than the average human, then yeah, you can just do that. I do it now in my job. Once I've spec'd out what I need to do, I just VPN into America and use the computing usage. I'll just get it to do it, and it just runs my computer for me. It will stitch a lot of tasks together, and that is interface collapse. You can't say my job is a series of tasks that I've got to stitch together anymore, because the machine does it better. And if it doesn't, if it even can do half of it, well, that's half your job gone, and you just verify it. On economically valuable tasks, it's at 84.9%. That is the benchmark to watch, because that is the one where it's economically valuable work. It's not like toy math problems or little puzzles and stuff. It is like, write me this report.
I remember when some of the LLMs were reported as scoring very well in doctors' exams. They could outperform the average student doctor in an exam. And the retort was, You guys don't realize that most of what doctors do isn't something that's tested in an exam. There's a whole bunch of human attributes. And so simply that you can do the various tasks is no guarantee at all that there's a replacement. So how can you be sure there won't be other aspects of the human employment that will still be there?
There will be. The thesis doesn't say that all humans will become redundant. What it says, there just won't be enough humans to maintain the wage demand circuit. Now we have mass middle class employment in white collar jobs, which powers everything. But you can't run it on a few elite doctors that are there to be doing the carer work. There'll always be jobs for people, but it's whether there's enough to maintain the system that's been around for the last 70 years, which in itself could be classed as an anomaly anyway. Postwar capitalism, you could argue that it's unstable anyway and would have collapsed regardless of AI.
I'm curious that you think there will still be some jobs for people, because I thought you were going to argue that there'll be no jobs because unit cost dominance will hit every single activity that humans do for money.
There'll still be jobs there, liability roles and roles that do need the human touch. There will always be people that will pay that premium. There just won't be mass absorption. You will still get a few doctors there, you just need fewer of them.
Okay, so assuming then that we're heading for this almost full automation, at least enough automation that the traditional economy collapses, can societies stop that by implementing regulations or taxes like the Pigouvian tax idea that we covered in our previous episode?
No, it's just not possible because it's a thing called prisoner's dilemma, competition. Basically, if you don't automate, then your competitors will. You'll just get automated out because of the cost dominance. Imagine, go back to the solicitors example where you've got a firm of solicitors that will stay human. Anybody that automates will just outcompete you.
Sure, so that applies at the firm level, but what about at the government level? Admittedly, there are 200 plus governments, so it's a lot of people to coordinate, but an optimist could argue that we could get cooperation among governments and have a Pigouvian tax introduced globally, and that could stop the automation process.
So you've still got the prisoner's dilemma at national level as well. Say China and America both agreed to stop. Basically, you could agree, but then everybody just defect anyway. And the reason is, you can't actually define what cooperation is anyway. How would the agreement be? We have to limit our AI. It's like, how do you define that? And that's the Sorites collapse principle. Basically, you can't draw a line between AI assistance and AI replacement.
Now, the Sorite collapse is something people might not know about. That was quite interesting. Explain that to us.
Basically, it's the paradox of a heap. It's like you've got a grain of sand, you add one other grain of sand to it, it's not a heap. You keep adding a grain of sand. When does it become a heap? Although heaps exist, the principle is that there's no nice solid line where you can say, this is AI assistance and this is AI replacement. You can't write a treaty about how much AI to stop. How would you even word it? We'll not use anything better than GPT 5.5 to stop there. And then what about if we do GPT 5.5.1 or something like that, and it's a little bit better? And then before you know it, I'm using Mythios and cheated. So then everybody just cheats because nobody can enforce it. Because nobody can define the lines. Well, that's the issue.
But you might consider speeding. You might say that 1 mile an hour is safe and another mile an hour faster is safe.
Yeah.
And that 300 miles an hour is dangerous. So where do you draw the line? Well, society makes some decisions. On the motorways in the UK, it's 70 miles an hour, and increasingly in built-up areas now it's 20 miles an hour. And it's not an exact science, but we collectively decide it's for the good of society.
Yeah, but you can measure that though, can't you? You can't measure how much AI you've used today, can you? That's the difference.
Well, you can. You can measure the number of tokens you've used.
But what tokens? GPT 5.5 tokens? GPT 5.4 tokens? Kimi tokens? Claude tokens? Who measures that? What if I just use it on my Mac now?
Well, that sounds like an interesting engineering challenge. It's hard, but building AI in the first case is hard, and you get lots of clever people figuring out how to improve the performance of large language models. And similarly, you could get lots of people spending a long time defining the limits of safe and unsafe AI.
But that's the Sorite collapse principle. There is no line. Back to the law example. Solicitor wakes up in the morning, I feel really tired today. he has to use more AI to get the same output. You can't measure it. How much AI do you use to write a contract? I don't know. How do you measure it? You can't say, well, that's 60 miles an hour, or 60 tokens a minute. It depends on his frame of mind in a particular day. How much AI did he use? To do it, you'd have to somehow measure everybody's thoughts and everybody's token use at a local level. And you'd have to measure as well any other diffusion. So if I had somebody, say, in Vietnam that had a model, they could use it and then phone me up and tell me the answer. That's AI as well. How would you stop that? The nature of AI is it's everywhere. It's like putting a fence around fog. You'll just root around it.
So to clarify one point, I believe you do agree that there can be some useful regulation of AI. For example, AI that produces dangerous information or sexually explicit materials.
Yeah.
You can foresee regulation in these areas.
Yeah.
So what prevents there being regulation of the speed of displacement of people from the workforce?
You'd have to define the boundary between replacement and assistance, and it's just not definable. How much AI would you allow somebody to use? I know you've just said, well, you can't sack anybody. You don't sack people, you just don't hire people instead, or you just outsource it to another jurisdiction. You said it last episode. What if somebody in Estonia just starts using it? How do you tell? And I think your guest just said, well, you'd have to put up some trade barriers. How would you even know? If you're in Estonia and I'm using an LLM under my desk, you can get a GPT-4 class model that runs on your computer now that does the work. It might only save me 50%, but that's still quite a lot. That's still ruinous. It might not be the 100x that a frontier model will do, but even something that would run on a 5-year-old computer can save you 2x. How would you stop it? And then there's still the diffusion just by voice. If I've got a guy in China that's just running the model, he just rings me up and just tells me what to type. How would you stop that?
So it seems that you do foresee this almost inevitable transition where fewer and fewer people are earning wages that can help them to survive.
Yeah.
So what do you see as the way forwards from this? Should we just reconcile ourselves to most people not having jobs and not having incomes?
Just because I've got to design the successor system now, and that's what's so hard. The thesis actually stops at the system ends because a lot of people saying, well, do UBI. But that's system replacement. Our current system is based on productive necessity. Once you take that away, it takes a few other things away. Just giving people money is just like being in a zoo. You're just fed by the government, the whims of the government and the machine. Whereas today, you work and you're actually useful. Most people are useful. If you withdraw your labour, there are consequences. But in a future where consumption is maintained by UBI, the government decides, well, actually, we don't want to give it you anymore. You've got no comeback at all. What is the best way to have an after system? How do we design that so most people aren't at the whim of the government or the elites or the singleton or whatever emerges? That is the key thing now, because I'm pretty sure that the wage circuit cannot be saved.
Let's assume you're right and the wage circuit can't be saved. Have you any intuitions about what is the answer to that situation? Because if the wage circuit dies and we don't find a solution, then every person dies.
They don't die. I think it will end up more like Brazil or South Africa, where you've got an elite and then pretty much an irrelevant class that are just there. Gross inequality.
But people do work and there are incomes in Brazil and South Africa. You're positing a world where almost all of those incomes have gone away and people without any means of getting the resources they need to live, like food, shelter, they do die.
That's why we'd probably have to have some type of universal basic income, but that system replacement.
So you think that probably is the answer, a distribution system like UBI?
Yeah, I think it is. And it probably would have to come from extracting gains from the AI somehow, locking in ownership.
What do you mean by locking in ownership?
Well, because at the moment, the AI is owned by private companies. To get the money off and we have to tax them. But because these companies are mobile, they'll just move to other jurisdictions. But if today, whilst they still need us and they still need like land and water and energy, we say, well, we'll give you this energy if you give us shares. You know, sort of like Donald Trump's talking about having shares in OpenAI and Anthropic. I think that's what you should do. The government should be saying, if you want to set up here now, you have to give us some equity in exchange for allowing you. Because otherwise, 10, 20 years down the line, the machine won't need us at all. They'll just hoard everything. So I think it's best to lock in the ownership now, whilst Labour's still got leverage, and whilst governments still have further down the line, we'll have no leverage at all, and we'll just be given what we get.
So that could plausibly work for America, or at least California, and for China. What does the rest of us do?
That is a very big problem. I've thought about that, and I don't think there are any good answers at all. Our data centres in the UK, even if somehow we magically took a Colossus and got all those GPUs, because our electricity is double the price, we wouldn't be able to afford to run them anyway, and we'd get unit cost dominated because of our electricity. That is a problem, and I don't think I've got any good answers for that. If you've got AI companies to seize and tax, you might be okay. But if you are a second-tier country like the UK or essentially Europe, I'm not sure what the answer is. One that keeps our standard of living the way it is. Maybe the uncomfortable thing is that we need to sort of cozy up to America and say, please throw us something.
We'll be right back after a quick break.
Imagine being in the boardroom with the world's most influential C-suite executives, exploring big questions about the economy, AI, and hybrid work. Welcome to C-Suite Perspectives, hosted by Steve Odland, President and CEO of the Conference Board, the ultimate podcast for professionals seeking the truth beyond trending headlines. Cut through the noise and dive into data-driven discussions, unbiased, nonpartisan, and straight from the top. Listen to C-Suite Perspectives and harness the power of trusted insights for what's ahead.
When do you think this rather scary turn of events is going to happen? When do you think unit cost dominance is going to strike us?
I think it's going to be in the next 5 years, quite easily. As soon as current technology diffuses, it's going to kill enough jobs. You can see the early days of that in the youth unemployment crisis. That's the measure you want to see. A lot of people are redundant now, but still get paid because it's hard to sack people and it looks bad. But when they leave, they just don't get replaced. A healthy labour market needs people at the bottom, and they're just excluded. That's why you've got like 1 million NEETs, unemployed graduates. The system just does not need the people anymore. Blaming kids themselves on smartphones is actually quite perverse, I think.
So Ben, to ask you a rather blunt question, you think that unit cost dominance is going to arrive in 5 years or so, and that it might just be possible for America and China to nationalize enough AI production that they can keep their people alive. Why aren't you moving to California?
If I wanted to move somewhere, I probably would try and move to America. But yeah, I can't. Visas and stuff.
I mean, you've got 5 years. To quote the famous Bowie song, we've got 5 years.
There's no way I'd be able to get into America now. I don't think I'd qualify for any type of visa. But I think the UAE might do.
Another approach might be to argue an extension of what you were suggesting before. The suggestion is that ownership needs to be locked in. We shouldn't just leave it in the hands of a few private individuals, because once they have too much power, we'll never be able to wrench it back. But could there be an argument that the ownership of these powerful technologies needs to go beyond an individual country before one country gets too powerful? And why would countries sign up to that? Well, they can't be sure that they're going to be dominant. America cannot be sure that they're going to win the race to AI superintelligence. Nor can China be sure. It could come out of a left field country. It's unlikely to come out of Europe, but who knows what may emerge. So there might be an argument that in everybody's interest, we should collectively decide that these AIs won't just be owned by the US government or the Chinese government, but by somehow on a universal global level. And that may sound incredibly naive and utopian, but unless people start talking about it, there's no chance at all that it's ever going to happen.
That's never going to happen. The only people that can win realistically are China and America, because the inputs are compute. That's why NVIDIA is worth so much. There's no way that Britain or Europe or anybody else can actually compete with those now, because compute and energy, they are the main things that you need.
Doesn't Europe have ASML, for example, and also a German company that produces uniquely the lenses that are used in the equipment?
Yeah, they might be like small choke points, but you can't build a model from that. You need the GPUs, and I think it is Mistral, the French one. If you look at their GPUs, I think their GPUs are in the thousands, and America's in the millions, and China's in the lower millions, I think. The compute needed to compete is just so immense, and the energy cost to run these data centers is so huge that I just don't think Europe could do it. Even Russian gas, I just don't think Europe has got the electricity. If we could magically transport Colossus to anywhere in Europe, even in Spain with all the solar panels, I just don't think the electricity is cheap enough. They're the bottlenecks. Compute and electricity, that's what you need. And I just don't think Europe's got it. Possibly the UAE might have it. I think they're trying to convert some of their power into compute.
Now, some economists listening to this, they may say there are so many explanations as to why there are people being unemployed. Why is this really down to AI? What are the statistics that you can point to that should convince more people, if not today, then in the near future, that your thesis is correct?
The famous one is the Stanford University AI Labs paper called Canary in the Coal Mine. And it did say that employment's down to like 16% in exposed professions.
But people are still not paying attention to it. Most people probably never heard of that, or if they have heard of it, they might say, well, I'll put it on my reading list and I'll get round to it eventually.
Yeah, they do. But to me, that's the best indicator. And just looking at the lack of jobs for young people, so it's just common sense. The common sense one is actually quite bad. I remember one of my arguments with the bot, it's like, well, this is common sense. It's, well, a lot of economics was common sense until it wasn't. The classic one it said was peak oil.
Peak oil.
Peak oil. People in the 90s were saying, we're going to run out of oil, aren't we? That's obvious, isn't it? There's a finite amount of oil, we're going to run out of it, and we've passed it now, and it's only going to go downhill. But people didn't count on all that shale gas and all the efficiencies. We've still got plenty of oil, and it isn't like $200 or $300 a barrel, which I probably would have predicted a few years ago.
So appeals to common sense won't convince people, and so we need to be able to point to harder, incontrovertible data.
Yeah, it's a mechanical argument, though. To refute it, you've really got to show me the new jobs that are going to come up, that pay a decent wage, that are AI-resistant, and mass. If you name them, yeah, the thesis just dies. And also, the Canaries in the Coal Mine paper, the actual data set from that is now an indicator on the Stanford website. They're going to release that data monthly. And if that, for whatever reason, goes up 2 quarters in a row, that would falsify the thesis. If this time next year we look back and say, well, actually entry-level hiring went up in exposed occupations, something's happened that I can't think of, that would falsify it, and that would be very good. New jobs are opening up that the AI hasn't eaten. There's a full appendix of what would falsify the thesis, naming the jobs, certain indicators, like the ratio between seniors and juniors. If that went down, entry-level hiring, that is, I think, the key measure we need to look at, because the overall employment rate might stay stable, but it's at the bottom where the new people enter. If that's blocked off, that's a bad sign for the labour market.
We should talk about your website Cope Check as well. That gathers together some astonishing statements by many of the apparent leading lights of AI thinking and broader society. And it seems in many cases they are saying, hey, it's common sense there's going to be plenty of jobs. It's common sense that these considerations are in the far future. And generally you rate them as various kinds of cognitive mistakes or worse. Tell me more about that.
They're just coping. A lot of people just have to say it. Imagine Jensen Huang at NVIDIA. You can't say, we're building your replacement. Actually, your next employee's H100 card is going to be, we're going to have more jobs. Nobody wants to say, we're liquidating you. Apart from Dario. He's quite honest about it.
Dario Amodei of Anthropic.
Yeah, Dario Amodei. He's always on about how it will cause lots of mass job losses. He's softened up recently, I think, because of his IPO, but he knows it. Elon knows it as well, and he's going on about universal high income. He can say it, but what mechanism? And I do remember when Grok 4 came out, he actually said, this is a brilliant time, and I don't know whether it'll be good or not, but at least I was here when it happened. And I think that was a tell. I think he knows it's bad, but he can't stop because it's this multiplayer prisoner's dilemma. If he stops, then somebody else will just do it. Dario tried to say, we need to pause, but one, what does pause mean? And how would you enforce it? And you can't. Say even China and America both did it. North Korea carry on, Iran. Britain. Us three could do it. How would you stop us three just carrying on? You can't really pause. Everybody's trapped in this multiplayer prisoner's dilemma where everybody has to just keep racing forward.
Well, Ben, I think that you need to get your LLMs to figure out the answer to this. You've raised the question, you've set the problem, and now we need a solution.
The thing is, first though, people have to admit that the system is over. A lot of people don't want to admit that. They go into like a little shell, just ignoring it, and start attacking peripheral things.
For sure. The first step is to get as many people as possible to agree that there is a problem. But then, very quickly, we need a solution. And in fact, we need the solution before most people accept there's a problem. Because if most people accept there's a problem and see no solution, there's going to be panic. And that could be very dangerous.
The thing is, though, even if you panicked, what realistically can you do? It's called a black pill. Knowledge doesn't actually give you any agency. If tomorrow everybody woke up and knew what were happening, we couldn't stop it anyway, because the prisoner's dilemma still occurs.
But we can make things a great deal worse in the short term by stopping economic activity and turning to rioting instead. That wouldn't be very good, would it?
I don't think we can riot because the machine feeds us. There's no Winter Palace's storm. And if we did start rioting, smash the machine, because the machine feeds us, our society would collapse anyway. And I don't think there's anything to rebel or riot against. What do we riot against?
But there is rioting taking place. There's people who are fed up with aspects of society. They're not quite sure what the cause is.
Yeah.
And they're attacking what they assume to be the cause of their status dissonance, their alienation. And it'd be far better if we could point to at least some routes forward. And they may not be entirely worked out. One of them is that the AI will itself turn out to be benevolent and really care about humans and will impose a transfer of sufficient income to everybody to have a good quality of life. Another outcome is that the few people who are in charge of the new AI will themselves be sufficiently benevolent. They might go into a competitive mode in the short term in a mad rush to win, but the ones who do win could be truly magnanimous. And the third thing is that through our collective action, we could persuade the people who are working on AI to prioritize more focus on benevolence rather than risky, dangerous activity. So I think there's three possible ways that we might envision this, and it's up to us to figure out which of them deserve more of our collective attention. And if we don't offer a positive scenario, well, it's no surprise that people will try to cope with the bizarre self-justifications and rationalizations.
But the scenarios you said aren't actually that great, are they? You just say, well, we just hope that we get fed after by the AIs, which to me is not a good scenario.
But we might be able to influence the likely nature of the AI that's built so that it has benevolence built deeply into it rather than just a veneer of benevolence, which is what we sometimes get out of the way AIs are grown at the moment. My final question to you is, if you did have the ear of some politicians, if a politician happened to hear this, or an advisor to a politician happened to hear this, and then rang you up and said, what should I do differently? What is the short elevator pitch response you would give them?
Shift the tax base before you need to. If wage income, share roads, everything funded by payroll and income taxes decays with it, move now towards immobile tax bases, land, energy, water, compute footprint. And then it's trade permits for equity, not promises. AI capital currently needs things, power, water, land, connection rights. That leverage expires. Spend it on a permanent citizen, equity stakes, entrenched as property, not employment covenants that will not survive contact with unit economics. Watch the right dials, because headline unemployment will stay deceptively calm, whilst the mechanism eats the bottom of the ladder. So you've got to look for junior to senior ratios, graduate non-absorption, and the wage finance share of consumption. People still might spend, but if they're dipping into their savings, that's not a healthy labour market anyway. And then the last one, understand what the window is for. You're not designing the final system. Nobody can, because it all collapses into the alignment problems. What does the AI end up doing in the end? But we're setting the initial conditions of ownership, which get locked in. That's why trade permits for equity, whilst we've still got the leverage.
So act whilst we've still got leverage and realise that the amount of time for leverage is shrinking fast. And if we get distracted by lots of other things, important though they are, we may suddenly discover we've lost that leverage. which is why it's been great to have had you on the show, Ben. Thanks very much for coming on the London Futurists podcast and talking about the discontinuity thesis.
Thanks for joining us, Ben.
Thank you for having me.